The day they bring me proof against Bishop Barros, then I will speak. There is not a single piece of proof against him. Everything is slander. Is that clear?
Well, it seems everything wasn't clear for Pope Francis, because just days after making that comment, he was forced to send the Vatican's top sex crimes expert to Chile. The investigation targets Bishop Juan Barros and whether the church official covered up the crimes of a pedophile priest. And while the Vatican says new evidence has emerged, critics have lambasted the Pope, saying he doesn't understand the depth of the crisis in South America. Well, let's go to our panel now. In London is the president of the National Secular Society UK, Keith Porteous-Wood. And we also have Jack Valero. He's the founder of Catholic Voices, a project aiming to improve the church's representation in the media. And finally, in Rome, Christopher Lamb, a correspondent for The Tablet, an international Catholic news weekly. I thank you all for joining us. Christopher Lamb, let me begin with you. Some see this as damage limitation from the Vatican because of the embarrassment of supporting Barros, and eventually they've sent this investigator. Is that how it played out?
Well, I think it was tough action that the Pope needed to take in this case. As you report said, the Pope had upset victims by saying that accusations that Bishop Barros was accused of a cover-up were calumny, and therefore to send Archbishop Scicluna, who is really the toughest or most credible investigator on abuse that the Church has, was A, a bit of a volte-face, to be honest, but B, it was the tough action that I think the Pope needed to take to get a grip of this story. The other thing that has developed today is that a letter was sent to the Pope in 2015 detailing some of the claims against Barros and detailing the abuse that Barros is said to have witnessed. So this is an issue. This is a case that is kind of spiraling out of control a bit for Francis. So I think that the sending of Scicluna was absolutely necessary, and I think does show that the Pope is willing to take action.
All right. So Keith, the Pope twice rejected Barros's resignation. He tried to stop others from getting Barros to resign. He defended Barros very recently, saying there's no evidence. And even if, Keith, this has been damage limitation by sending Scicluna, this guy is the gold standard. He's the best investigator around, and the Pope's taking this seriously. Should we be giving credit where it's due? He's doing something about it right now.
Well, I think we all agree that it's damage limitation, but I'm afraid I have history with Archbishop Scicluna. When I, after a great deal of effort, was helping the UN Committee for the Rights of the Child to actually take on the Holy See over child abuse about 5 years ago, the person they sent to speak for the Holy See, one of the two spokespersons was Archbishop Scicluna, and the evasion that I witnessed and the hostility subsequently when the committee produced its report asking for rather reasonable things like immediately removing all known and suspected child abuse abusers from assignment and referring them to law enforcement and ensuring transparent sharing of all archives, all they got back from the Vatican and the Holy See was an attack, and I think impertinence. Okay. I mean, that should have been a to-do list that they didn't need to start a commission.
Okay, so Jack, does Keith make a good point that even the guy who is sent now to help combat abuse and finally put an end to this and investigate this, he might have a not-so-great resume in Keith's eyes? Is that fair?
I don't think so. I think he's the best you can find. He's not afraid of telling truth to power and of anyone or anything. I think there was a particular thing with the United Nations Rights of the Child Committee, who had written their report before he actually arrived and didn't take account of the things that he told them, which was not very well done then. But I think if we put that aside, he's a very particular, very meticulous man. He will definitely investigate. I think the Pope believes Barros to be innocent, but obviously he's realized that that's not enough. It's not enough for him to think he's innocent. he must, some impartial person must go there and leave no stone unturned. So I, as a Catholic, feel very happy that somebody has gone who is impartial and who can ask all the people and let us know after investigation what the situation is. I think the situation of the church in Chile is different from the situation of the church in Argentina, where the Pope comes from. There's a lot more clericalism and many more problems. So I think that the Pope perhaps needs to do more there, which he hadn't realized before.
Right.
So sending Scicluna, I think, is a good move.
Christopher Lamb, just sort of stepping back and trying to contextualize this for the moment, because you hinted in your first answer that something big is afoot, right? Just remind us. So we have Barros being accused of covering up the crimes of a pedophile priest. That priest, called Reverend Fernando Caradima, sanctioned by the Vatican in 2011. Just remind us of how toxic that situation was with Caradima and just what he did.
Well, Caradima is accused of abuse of a number of minors, a number of children. Caradima was a hugely charismatic figure in Chile and a mentor to a number of bishops, including to Bishop Barros. Now, in the latest story that's been produced today by AP, Barros himself is accused of having some sort of relationship with Caradima, and Caradima possibly abusing Barros. So it's a hugely toxic and difficult situation there in Chile. When Pope Francis appointed Barros to the Diocese of Osorno, which is where he is currently, there were protests outside the cathedral for the ordination service. This has been something that has been a problem for Francis for some time, and I think that whilst this Pope is widely seen as a very popular, reform-minded Pope who has won the support of the vast majority of Catholics, on this issue, which is such a toxic issue, it is threatening to cause problems for this Pope. He is the Teflon Pope in many ways, but this issue has the potential to kind of pierce through some of that Teflon.
Right. So, Jack, is that accurate? Has this maybe put a dent in the Teflon? Has this hurt the Church and Pope Francis and this kind of, this angelic image that he's had across the world among Catholics and non-Catholics as well?
Yes, perhaps it has. And I think that, I think personally within him, he's definitely against all child abuse, and he's for zero tolerance, and he wants what everybody wants, the three things, that this never happens again, that the victims are recompensed, that the perpetrators are punished, and there's cover-up. But is he
not at all
serious enough to do something about it? And therefore, what he needs to do a number of things, like he needs to make sure that the commission that was set up for the purpose works again, is in a bit of a hiatus at the moment. He needs to look at specific places where this is a big problem, like Chile, where it has been a big problem, and he needs to take more action.
Okay,
but I think this could be the beginning, the beginning of something.
Okay, interesting point. So Keith, right, when Jack said very specifically, this Pope is against child abuse, you shook your head in disagreement and had a wry smile. You can't tell me the Pope is pro-child abuse, can you?
Well, he hasn't done very much about it, and we are even before he was Pope. If we go back to the much respected Bishop Accountability website, we will actually discover that he was saying that there was no problem in his diocese. And yet there were 4 named people who were abusers and evidence, abuse victims, and there's evidence that he knowingly or unwittingly, I quote, slowed victims in their fight to expose and prosecute them. They sought the Cardinal's help and none of them received it, and that's been confirmed by his former spokesperson. So he's got form. I saw over a period of 4 years what happened at the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, and it's very clear that with the hostility and impertinence of the exchanges there, and you just can't imagine that could happen without the new Pope's personal direction. And then you have this commission, which Jack's generously admitted is basically dead in the water, with the two only victims on it having departed in a complete disgust. Peter from NAPAC actually said that he begged the Pope to attend one of their meetings, but what did he do? He spent the whole day watching a procession of coffins. So, I mean, it really is terrible. The tribunal that was set up was done suspiciously soon after the first person was convicted for child endangerment in the States. And it was effectively providing an alternative route to avoid those people going through the criminal process. Okay, so let me ask... thing the UN asked for.
Okay, fair enough. So Jack, you would, I guess, respect that this comes from a good place, because Keith cares about children not being abused by priests, right? Would you accept?
Yeah, so we all care about them,
Would you accept and
course.
respect his skepticism that even this Pope, even Pope Francis, the reformer, the superstar Pope, is not doing enough?
Well, what is enough? It's never enough until it's sorted. I mean, we've seen that structures of power are the problem. I mean, we've seen it in Hollywood. We've seen it in premiership clubs. When there is power which is unchecked, then these things happen. And this is what happened in Chile, in that parish. This is what's happened in other places. One thing is what has gone wrong, and the other thing is whether this Pope in his heart wants to sort it. I think he does want to sort it, and therefore he has sent this man to investigate. Once this has happened, lots more needs to happen, but it's going in the right direction. I don't believe that it is a lost cause, as Keith seems to imply.
Okay, so Chris,
no, it's going, we're doing things about it.
Okay, so Christopher, in terms of public opinion, and this is where it gets a little bit murky now, because everybody's talking about it right now, and everybody was upset that the Pope seemed to maybe be insensitive to alleged victims, initially by defending the man and saying there's no evidence. Now he sent an investigator. It's locked into a kind of inevitability now, isn't it? Because anything other than Barros maybe being found guilty would be unsatisfactory, right?
Well, I think then it's going to need to be some action. I mean, Archbishop Scicluna's investigation is likely to report, sometime in the next few months. We probably won't see the outcome of that report, and it will be kept between the Pope and Scicluna. But I think this is something that the Pope needs to get ahead of, get a grip on. I think there was a distinction, though, to be made between what the Pope is accused of in this case and what other bishops have been accused of. The Pope is being accused here of being insensitive to victims, to not making the needs of victims a high enough priority. Now, he's not being accused of a specific cover-up, but he's been accused of insensitivity to victims. Now, that's where the Church has now got to deal with the sex abuse scandal. It's moved from the cover-up area, which of course still are cover-ups, but it's moved much more to a situation where are you as a Pope, as the Vatican, dealing with taking this issue seriously enough, taking the needs of victims seriously enough, and responding? And that's where the Pope seems to have fallen down or fallen short.
Yep.
Or seems to have a blind spot.
Right.
But I think that with this case, with the Barros case, the Pope does need to respond, to take action. And I think the Scicluna move goes some of the way to dealing with that. We'll have to see what Scicluna comes back with and what the Pope decides to do. Of course, we won't be privy to the details of the inquiry, though.
Right. Okay, Keith, I know you want to come in. I'm completely out of time, so I'm going to give you 20 seconds, if you don't mind, if you could keep rigidly to that. 20 seconds. Go, Keith.
Well, I think the Pope, his record is exposed by his willingness to support Barros and also Cardinal Pell, whose reputation was well known. Anybody would steer away from those people if they were of right mind.
Okay, so let's try and see what happens when Scicluna actually goes and what comes out of it. Gentlemen, it's been good to talk to you about a very important topic. Keith Porteous-Wood, Jack Valero, and Christopher Lamb. I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers.